What's going on, everybody? Anthony here with Apex, back again with another video. Today we have a throwaway Honda mower. So I found this thing by the dumpster and looks like somebody didn't want it. So maybe we can fix it and turn this trash into treasure, or maybe it's not worth repairing at all. So let's go ahead and get started on our diagnosis and let's see what we can do with this thing. So as always, first things first is let's check the oil and check its condition. If it's low, if it's high, let's smell it, let's do everything. So as you can see, every hash mark on this thing, if it'll focus, is covered in oil, which tells me that it's good on oil. Let's see the viscosity here. So I'm gonna turn it upright like this, see if it drips. If this starts dripping, that tells me that the oil is too broken down, it's the wrong viscosity, or it's got gas in it. So now we'll smell it. And if it smells like gas, then that's obviously an issue with the carburetor leaking into the sump. But as of right now, everything looks good. It looks like it's got newer oil in it. Viscosity is good. It doesn't smell like gas, so that's a good start. So something I noticed here is that it doesn't have a spark plug in it, so we'll have to install one and go from there. So one thing I noticed is that it doesn't have a spark plug in it, so we're gonna have to address that first, but let's move on to the next step. So next thing up, we're gonna make sure that we have a pull cord, and we do. And next, we're gonna make sure the brake cable is working as designed. So when you pull this back, remember that it needs to start pulling tension as soon as you put pressure on it. It should not start to put tension when it's close to the actual handlebar. So let's go ahead and test that, which, yep, plenty of pull on that thing. So let's go ahead and put a spark plug in it and go from there. Okay, so to install the spark plug, you're just gonna need a 13/16 socket and a BPR 5ES spark plug. This is an NGK. This is the one that actually comes in it from the factory, but if you go to sparkplugcrossreference.com, you can cross-reference this to any other spark plug that's the same type of spark plug, but maybe a different manufacturer. So you can get an Autolite or whatever it is, whatever local auto parts store has near you, then you would just get that spark plug. So I'm gonna hand thread it at first. So most people don't hand thread it, and that's how you damage spark plug holes. So I'm just gonna thread it in like so. And then I'm gonna thread it in all the way to where it almost bottoms out here. So just like that, take your tool, slide it over the spark plug, and start tightening. So I'm going to tighten it. Usually once you bottom it out, it's going to take a full half turn to be able to tighten it and crush that crush washer. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and install the spark plug boot, just like that. Okay, now let's see if this thing actually starts. So I'm going to squeeze the bail here and then give it a pull. So this is an auto choke, you know, that's what most mowers are these days. And let's just give it a pull and see what happens. So as you can see, when I pull this, there's almost no resistance. So that's telling me that we may not have some compression. So what you can do is pull your mower slowly, and you should feel kind of a jolt, and it should pull past that. So you should feel when it goes at that top dead center, you should have a small pop, like a small pullback, a little bit of resistance, and it should keep going. But as you can see, this doesn't have that. It just keeps pulling smooth all the way through. So that's a problem. Okay, so now what do you do next? Well, I'm gonna show you guys. So if you have a compression tester, this is where you'd connect it right now. You can also do a leak down test, which that'll tell you what's leaking. Maybe it's an intake valve, exhaust valve, or a cylinder. Or simply, let's just check and make sure the piston is moving inside the engine. So let's go to that step first. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove the spark plug from this thing. So reverse the process that we just did. So let's go ahead and get that thing removed. Just like that. Okay, so at this point, we're going to shine a flashlight down the cylinder here and make sure that piston is moving. Now, you can just grab the blade from the bottom and rotate the blade and see if the piston is moving. Okay, and as you can see, our piston is definitely moving, so that's a good sign. Okay, so now at this point, I would go ahead and do a compression test if you have it and a leak down test if you have it. But I'm trying to make these videos for someone who doesn't have all those fancy tools. But as of right now, your next step is going to be to get that valve cover off, and let's check the valves. It can be something as simple as just a rocker arm is too tight, not allowing that valve to come all the way in contact with the surface, and it could just be a small valve adjustment. But let's get that valve cover off and take a look. Okay, so what you're going to want to do next is get the mower upright on the front wheels. So put a jack stand under the front or some blocks, something, have someone stand it up and just get the mower upright, because that's not going to allow the oil to flow out of the valve cover and make a mess. So, and if you can, let it sit like that for like 10-15 minutes to let that oil run to the back of the engine. If it is overfilled or if it has oil in the top end of it, then it'll just make your mess a lot less. So we're going to take this mower like this, and I'm just going to set it up on this jack stand just like that, and that is all it's going to take. Okay, now take a 10mm socket here, and we're going to go ahead and remove the valve cover. There's 4 screws that hold it on, so let's go ahead and remove those now. Again, you don't need power tools. You can use just a regular old-fashioned ratchet, but most people have an impact driver to be able to do it this way. This valve cover is actually already loose. So what that tells me is that someone's already been into this and they already know that this thing may be beyond repair, or maybe they're just scared to move on. So as you can see, no oil comes out of it because we had the engine upright. So we can go ahead and throw our screws in there and set that to the side. Okay, so next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that the bell is squeezed down. You don't have to, but it makes the engine rotate a lot easier. And we're just going to go ahead and rotate this engine around and make sure our valves are doing valve things. All right, let's make sure the valves are doing valve things. Now we're going to have to rotate this engine around to make sure that these valves are moving up and down and they're moving freely. And to do this, you're going to be rotating the blade. So use gloves or use precaution when you're rotating the blade that you don't cut yourself or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate the blade in a clockwise motion here. And as I'm rotating this, I'm just making sure that the valves are moving. So the intake valve goes down and comes up. And as you can see, as I keep rotating this, the exhaust valve really never moves. And as you can see, this thing is so crazy loose, and no valve should be that loose. So let's keep rotating it. And as you can see, the exhaust valve, it had a little bit of jump there. And that's telling me that this exhaust valve is stuck. So as you can see, it is not coming up at all. So we definitely have a pretty big problem here. So as you rotate this, you can see that the intake goes down and exhaust never does its thing. So with that said, what our problem is our exhaust valve is literally seized. Okay, so what do you do now? Well, there's really nothing you can do. So as a shop or someone who's going to be charging a customer, you're basically pretty screwed, because you can't just replace a valve seat or a head in this thing, because there is no head. You have to literally replace half of the engine block. So that's a pretty pricey part, and it's a good amount of labor because everything has to be transferred, engine has to come apart into pieces, and it's basically not a fixable repair. But what happens in these is that the exhaust valve gets stuck in the guide. And what happens is it just gets carbon buildup or rusted, because as you can see, we got some rust here on the exhaust port. So it could be something as simple as just rust, and we can just free that up. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. Okay, so first things first, let's go ahead and remove this rocker arm. Now this is a giant rocker arm, not like most of them. So what you're going to do, or not like most engines, so what you're going to do is just push this pin up, slide this pin out, and always remember that it goes from top to bottom. Then remove your rocker arm, and as you can see, this thing is kind of crazy looking, but it only goes one way, so just set that to the side. And now we're going to go ahead and remove the valve spring and retaining clip here, and you're just going to, let me bring you in for a closer look here. So it's got a slot in it for the valve to push through, so I'm just going to push down on it and then push up towards that little hole, and as you can see, it's going to come right off. Okay, and I want to point out that this is kind of a janky repair, And what I would do is, like, I'm going to be using this as a personal mower, and I'm going to use it for about a season. And if you can get one or two or even three mows out of it, it's definitely worth selling. But I'm not going to unseize this and then go right ahead and sell it right away, because this is not a actual proper repair. So what I'm going to do now is take some vice grips like these here, and I'm going to just clip them onto this valve here like so. And I'm going to work this valve in and out, and I'm going to spray it with some penetrating fluid as well. So we're going to lock these pliers like so, and I'm just going to try to hammer it in and then pull it out. Hammer it in, pull it out over and over and over to get that valve moving again. Okay, so at this point, again, I'm just going to work this valve in and out. So I'm going to hammer it in like so. And always make sure that the piston is all the way down the cylinder so you don't hit the top of the piston. Not going to hurt it, but just want to make sure that you don't want to damage it. So I'm going to pull it straight out like this. And I'm just going to kind of, as you can see, this thing is already loosening up. So what happened is just a little bit of rust got in its place, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and spray with some penetrating fluid now and keep working it in and out. So this stuff will not hurt the engine. Just spray it on just on the side of the valve there, and it'll work its way down in there and make this process. Oh, look at that. It just literally slipped in place because of that lube getting in there. So I'm going to pull it all the way out and spray it a little bit more. I'm going to bring you all in for a close-up here. I'm just going to work that valve in and out just like that. I'm going to spin it around, make sure that it's loose in every direction. And as you can see, there's some rust and corrosion on that thing. So I'm just going to spray it a little bit more, kind of spray off that rust there. And I'm just going to keep working it in and out. So just like this. And as you can see, that valve is now pretty dang loose. So I can literally move it with my fingers there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and reassemble it. So I'm just going to slide my spring over. And now let's put on our retaining clip here. There's a big opening on it, and then you're just going to go past that opening, and without touching anything else, slide it right past that collar to where then you can then slide it over, and it's going to hold that thing nice and tight. Okay, you can slide the rocker arm in here like so. And then we're going to do a valve adjustment as well. And so I'm just going to put this pin right through the top there, and as you can see, that thing is nice and tight. So now let's take a look at what it looks like now. Intake valve goes down, exhaust valve, that was a compression release. Now that exhaust valve goes all the way in, comes all the way back up, and that's what we like to see. So now what you're going to do is set it at top dead center. So what that's going to be is you're going to watch this intake valve go down, and once this intake valve goes down, this is on every single engine out there. Once that intake valve goes down and starts to come back up, keep an eye on what the piston does. When the piston starts to come up in the cylinder, that's the compression stroke, and that's where you need to set this at top dead center. So now we're going to take a light here, and we're going to look at the piston. And when the piston comes all the way to the top, that's how we know we're at top dead center. So right there, and what you're going to notice is that the cam, the lobe, is going to be all the way straight up, just like that. And that's how you also know you're at top dead center. So now let's check these valves, and you can see that these valves are actually good. But I'm going to go ahead and adjust them, and we'll move on to the next step. And if you want me to do a video on adjusting valves, I can do that as well. I'm just going to go ahead and set them and move on to the next step. Okay, so at this point, valves are adjusted. Okay, now let's throw the valve cover on this thing. I'm not going to glue it because I just want to test it and make sure it works before I go through the troubles of cleaning off all the glue and resealing it. But what you're going to want to use is RTV, or go to your local auto parts store and they can get you an adhesive for this. But Honda Bond is the actual proper adhesive. So let's go ahead and just throw it on here, and let's just see if it starts up. So valve cover goes on. Let's take our 4 screws there and let's go ahead and put them in here. Like so. All right, now let's go ahead and throw that spark plug in there. Again, I'm going to hand thread it pretty much all the way in, and then we'll tighten it with the ratchet. Okay, nice and tight. Now let's go ahead and throw that spark plug boot on there, and let's go ahead and pull it over, see if it starts. Okay, now let's go ahead and give it a pull and see what happens. Let's see if this thing will even start. Okay, so check that out. This thing started right up. As you can see, it blew out a bunch of rust out the exhaust port. So that tells me that the exhaust valve was actually seized in place because of rust buildup from rain or water getting into the exhaust port. And there you have it. So that's all it took. So a little bit of labor. We're going to go ahead and glue that valve cover. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to sell this mower, but I'm going to use it and mow with it for like 2 or 3 times to make sure that that problem doesn't happen again. And 99% of the time it does not. But this isn't the proper way to do it. But if you have a mower like this and this happens to you, this will save you a bunch of time and a bunch of money. So if I save you time and money, make sure that you hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed to see more of my videos. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.